overreactions to all things NFL. It's the offseason, and that means it's a free agent frenzy. So, hey, we got Connor here, and we got Ronan.
Hello.
How are we getting on, Ronan? How's all down in Cork?
Yeah, not too bad. Just tipping away at work. Otherwise, pretty quiet. And don't want to confirm anything else, but things could be changing soon enough on that front as well. So, yeah, should be some exciting times ahead. But obviously, I've been celebrating the Seahawks victory for the last month or so, of course, day in, day out. But now that other teams get to do things, I suppose we have to pay some attention to the rest of the league.
Yeah, and your team are doing some things, or rather not doing some things as well, that we will be talking about. A bit of change coming in on a couple of the key contributors, I would say.
Free agency is like a T-Rex. You just have to stand perfectly still, and that's how you get the optimal outcome.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure that's definitely how it works, and not like big free agent pickups or late season trades were kind of key contributing parts to the Super Bowls that have happened in recent years. Yeah, no, nothing too wild or crazy. Ronan's being a little bit too bashful there to say he's so happy after the Seahawks victory and so patriotic that he's decided to join the U.S. military and ship out. So he is going to be flying over to the Middle East.
Yeah, I ran for the for the recruiter's office.
I ran to you. Very good. Yeah, no, nothing too wild or crazy here now. I got out playing golf once or twice since we were speaking last. It was nice. Played the fanciest course I've ever been to, Port Marnock Links. That was very cool. And getting out, where are we at now? 2 weeks time, I'm getting to play in the K Club out at the Irish Open course, so that'll be good fun as well. So having a bit of fun on that front. Heading down to Cork this weekend, so I'll be seeing yourself and I'll be seeing Sean and a few others down there. So that'll be nice. And yeah, nothing else too wild or crazy. Got a big feed of birthdays coming up. So my birthday, my wife's birthday, my dad's birthday, my brother's birthday, my sister-in-law's birthday, my brother's birthday are all in the space of 10 days. So it's quite a busy time. Oh, and there's Mother's Day in the middle. There's a reminder for anyone who's not realised. Next Sunday is Mother's Day in Ireland, not in America. So anyone who's over this side of the pond, just be warned. Now we have a big pile of free agency stuff to talk about, Ronan. There's a ton of it. I suppose just to start, the NFL cap has increased since last year. It was 279.2 million last year, 301.2 million this year, 22 million more than there was. For those who don't understand, essentially your team is allowed to spend a maximum amount on the team that they have, the roster that they have. This is only for the top is it 53 or 52? 53 players.
53,
You can, the idea being you can spread it around however you want. If you want to have a superstar quarterback, great. It just means you have less money to spend elsewhere and so on. You also have to spend a minimum amount. You can't just cheap out entirely. I think an average of 90% is the target or something roughly like that. But essentially what this means with the increasing cap is it makes it a little bit easier for teams to be able to afford players. It means prices might go up as well because there's more money to go around. And importantly for some teams, you'll see that they'll be doing longer term deals with players and pushing money further back. And this is what we mean when we say like, oh, the Eagles signed this guy to a 4-year extension. That's going to look really cheap in 3 years. It's that in 3 years time, there might be another 40 million, 50 million on the cap. And that means that the 20 million that they're paying them now, in 3 years time, if they're paying 20 million, it's probably closer to paying 15 million or so on. So relentless increase of the cap marches onwards. I'd be happy with them increasing it even more because I still think the players are underpaid versus the amount of money these guys make. But what do we think? It's not so big a jump that it's going to cause anything too crazy, right?
No, I think these are usually prorated out. Like I know it's under the CBA, it's a percent, it's like 51% of the total revenue of the league, so it is directly proportional to that. But this increase is basically just below the increase they had last year, which was like 23 something million, I believe. So we're kind of at a steady 20 million so per year, and that kind of steady state increase basically allows teams to kind of project forwards. Now some teams are more aggressive, and there's even talk about like when the Eagles won last year that they're stacking things up so that a whole bunch of like void years and basically where money would roll into the cap. Basically, Connor says it's like the cap is how much they're paid technically, but the cap number and what they're actually paid can often be somewhat divergent concepts on a per year basis, how that's actually allocated across the years. But there's some teams like the Eagles which have been aggressive and basically going, when the next TV deal is negotiated, suddenly this cap might go up even more aggressively again. But for now, I think for the next couple of years, it's expected to kind of stay in this like 20 million or so increase. So it's definitely been increasing so rapidly. Players will continue to get paid well, but it's not, as I say, we're not quite hyperinflation, but we are certainly in an inflationary environment in the NFL for the last decade or so at this point.
Yeah, we're not superstitious. We're just a bit stitious. That's all. So what we'll do in our preview here is we'll have a look kind of position by position at a couple of the top names and a few of the other people that are available in them. And like, if you know what your team is looking for, if you need a new running back, if you need a new safety or a cornerback, that'll kind of help you get that. Before we get into there's been some bits of action around the league that are going to impact this. So we have to chat about some like trade signings, the tags that have gone out, and the cuts. So we'll start with the trades, I suppose. The big one that came in 2 days ago, yesterday, the LA Rams have decided that they're going back to I believe the term was the fuck dem picks era, and they are not mad keen on drafting too many people in the first round. They've decided to trade their 2026 first round pick, fifth round pick, seventh round pick, and their third round pick next year to Kansas City for defensive back Trent McDuffie. Expect them to be giving him a big giant extension as well now. This makes sense, I think, for both sides. The Rams are in a very tight window with Stafford, albeit playing well, probably only a year or two max left there. They had problems in their secondary. McDuffie should help there. He's been an All-Pro. I think once he's been an All. He's been a Pro Bowl multiple times. I think he's been an All-Pro once or twice so far. He's been good, if not as good as he was beforehand, because he initially started being inside as a slot corner. Now he's playing a bit more outside. So like he had one or two games last year, particularly I think the CeeDee Lamb game. He kind of did not really stand up as well in that one, but he is a big improvement on what they have there. He's going to be a step ahead of anything they'd be able to get in free agency. And the Rams, they don't have a great history of drafting at the cornerback position. McDuffie is young. I think he's only 25 years old. So like this is a trade where they can lock him in for a couple of years and kind of set and forget, and then just start bringing in young pieces and see, can they find someone in the second or third round to put on the outside or inside him and so on. So like, I like this for both sides. I'll be sad to see McDuffie gone from Kansas City because I do like him, but this is kind of what we do. We're good at developing cornerbacks. We tend to trade them without giving them the big second deal, like so with Marcus Peters and with Snead and so on as well. Yeah. So like this is kind of the process, and it's a decent haul for a guy who realistically the Chiefs are going to be tight enough cap wise in the next year or two that like they probably couldn't afford to keep him as well as everyone else. So I like this for both sides.
Yeah, I think it reflects where both teams are. Like the Rams are in an instant win now mode. Obviously, we have no idea whether it might be Stafford's last year, but it doesn't feel like he's going to be here in like 2 or 3 seasons. So they're obviously going all in to give Stafford the best chance he has to win. And obviously, it's an indirect way by making the defense better, but that secondary outside of their special teams was probably the biggest weakness of that team. So putting in Trent McDuffie seems like an immediate upgrade for that team. And given, they fleeced the Falcons last year, they still have a first round pick, so they're not completely screwed in the draft situation either, in what is considered to be a relatively middling draft class regardless.
It wouldn't surprise me to see them go trading again, though. That's the thing.
For sure. Like that could definitely happen. And, they're not a team that's been afraid of being aggressive in the past in terms of trading. So I think for the Rams, it makes sense. I think there's a big emphasis in the Rams defensive system about the quote unquote star position, which in Quinton Lake is being effective at. So there is a potential for him to become more of that kind of nickel or big nickel, or kind of have some more play across the middle where he's been strongest. Yeah. And I think, increasingly, an increasing number of DCs now consider that to be as important, if not a more important position than the boundary cornerback at this point. So it'll be interesting to see whether they bring him back and put him in his position in strength instead of kind of considered the traditionally more important boundary cornerback position, the classic lockdown corner. So that'll be interesting to see from a schematic point of view. And from Kansas City's point of view, obviously, Kansas City are always in there, but obviously they're coming off a year where Patrick Mahomes got an injury late in the season, so that probably makes it less likely this is the season where they'll be going all in the sense that they're probably ramping up Mahomes over time, so they're probably hoping to get better over the course of the year than coming out 0 to 100 quickly. And it's also a year, obviously, where they're coming off recognizing that the the team was getting older and they don't have enough like intermediate talent to keep the kind of ship afloat for the kind of elite talent. Now, obviously, ideally, you wouldn't want to trade away your blue chip talents to get to that point, but needs must, as it were. And I'm sure there will be other cuts and changes made to the team. But I think like they've made some pretty aggressive moves, including the traditional like moving Mahomes' money around to open up some cap space. So I do imagine they're going to be a team that won't be like sitting on their laurels or anything like that, but they're basically kind of going, we'd rather have like 10 good players to kind of make our overall roster better, because the low points of the roster are quite low right now, and make sure we have a viable roster rather than kind of going, we need to pay the stars big money and make sure we keep them. So I think they're just in a different place right now, and I'm sure when Mahomes is like in his mid-30s, like they will be doing similar things to what the Rams have done, but they're still have that longer term
No, I don't know
horizon
what
to
you're
worry
talking
about.
about. Pat Mahomes is planning to play until he's 50. Maybe,
Well, or
mid 40s, maybe. Yeah.
whenever he reaches the Brady decline, whenever that would have hypothetically been,
Yeah,
at some day they will probably make that move. I don't think they're going to be like the Patriots where with Brady, where they basically never did it. But I think they have a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year horizon, whereas the Rams it's like a 1 or 2 year horizon,
yeah.
and so they're very much willing to go all in to get that done.
Yeah, Chicago have traded DJ Moore to Buffalo. It's a mid-round pick, is what we're hearing is going back, but we haven't got full details yet, as it's literally happening as we're speaking. This makes sense. Chicago, DJ Moore had a couple of high moments, particularly that game against the Packers, but he wasn't really fitting into what they have. They have kind of a wealth of young receiving talent there that would probably be in a better position to grow with the young quarterback. Moore is still capable, and Buffalo needed wide receiver help. So this kind of just makes sense to me quite a bit. Um, Tennessee have traded defensive tackle Tavondre Sweat for edge rusher Jermaine Johnson from the Jets. This one is very much, it feels like a scheme fit kind of thing. So obviously, um, Jermaine Johnson was at the Jets when Robert Saleh was the head coach and works well in the system that he wants to run. Saleh is now the head coach of Tennessee, so it makes sense that he's going to want a guy who knows the scheme and fits the scheme. And inversely, Tavondre Sweat is kind of a big space-eating defensive tackle who doesn't fit his scheme, but probably will fit the scheme in New York a little bit better for what they're trying to run. So like you don't see too many direct player for player trades these days, Ronan, but this one just seems to make sense. Like it should work out pretty well for both sides, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think, as you say, there's a schematic fit here. There's a fit with previous coaching, and like Jermaine Johnson, it's just kind of your kind of classic edge. He hasn't been quite as good the last couple of years, but I think he's been solid enough. Probably underperformed relative to his draft stock, but not being a bad player. And obviously will have familiarity with the Salah scheme, so I expect him to be a contributor for a Tennessee team that's basically rebuilding from scratch. And the Devontae Sweat, he had a really great rookie year if I recall correctly, but his baby
Yeah,
fallen off a little bit. But he's a big guy. Like he is very much there to take up to offensive linemen and just like an old school nose tackle type player. He has a bit more upside than that because modern NFL players are freaks, but that is his primary role. And obviously, the Jets, I remember Glenn, the Lions signed, for example, DJ Reader. I believe a few years ago in Detroit, who was kind of he's a bit more dynamic, but a big guy as well.
the same
So
kind of
obviously,
idea. Yeah,
it sounds like Aaron Glenn wants a kind of like a proper nose tackle to anchor that defense and hopefully get it back to a reasonable level. I don't know if he's going to help that much with interceptions, but he should add to the overall quality of the scheme, hopefully.
yeah. Well, they were also getting ran on at ease, so might help with that. Cleveland have traded a 2026 fifth-round pick for offensive lineman Titus Howard from Houston. This kind of again makes sense. Fifth might be a little bit rich for Titus Howard, but Cleveland, I think, is it 4 of the 5 starters or 5 of the 5 starters across the line are all have contracts expiring, so they need to bring in a lot of linemen. Overall, a fifth-round pick for a starting level guy is not terrible. It, Houston, if Houston are giving up an O lineman, it's never a great sign because their line wasn't phenomenal last year. But look, we'll see what happens. Cleveland are kind of scrambling a little bit, and then Houston turned around with that fifth round pick and decided that they wanted to do some more trades. Initially, it was said that they were getting David Montgomery from Detroit for a fifth round pick, and then that tweet was rapidly deleted and then replaced. So they're now getting a Tuesday or something, a 2026 fourth round pick, a 2027 seventh round pick, and also sending offensive lineman Juice Scruggs for David Montgomery from Detroit. Again, look, Houston need to get more dynamic in that backfield. Like Nick Chubb is a lovely chap. He's not a lead back. The new Joe Mixon, like he didn't play last year. He wasn't going to be ready for it. Again, like Montgomery's a good player. It does feel he's been around the league for quite some time at this point. I do think maybe at some point you used to need to look at getting a non-old veteran running back into the room. But Montgomery is a good runner. I'd like to see him paired with someone. They do have the young fella in there as well.
Yeah, Woody
Woody
Marks is
Marks
there, so
he had flashes, but overall wasn't getting the production. But like we said, look, their line wasn't great anyway either. But let's see. So basically, Houston have replaced Titus Howard with Juice Scruggs and David Montgomery, and swapped a fifth for a fourth for a fifth. So
yeah, I was a bit perplexed by these trades, frankly. Like Titus Howard, probably overpaid for what he's put on tape. Like he's never been like a great offensive lineman, but he's not been a bad one either. He's been like very much middle of the road, which for Houston is very much above what they generally have across the rest of their line. And he's someone who has experience of playing pretty much across the entire line except for center. And he's also has very few injury issues. I think he's only missed like 2 games in his career so far. So, you know, it seemed for me a little bit perplexing for a team in Houston which had so much offensive line issues, which you were referenced for the run game, but especially for the pass game, where, as we saw in the playoffs, CJ Stroud was like turned into like a sitting duck for like good defenses, admittedly, but like he did look like basically he was getting hammered for both of those playoff games. So a bit perplexing for me to make that decision. I know they like re-signed like Trent Brown, but I haven't really seen that much a solution. Like Drew Scruggs was a backup, so I wouldn't put too much stock in that. And then to trade for David Montgomery, like yeah, he's 29, like he's a good culture fit in the sense that he's like I know D'Amico Ryans runs a very kind of culture orientated locker room, like very rah, like just like very juiced up, like you see stuff in the locker room there. It certainly seems like a place that players want to play, and David Montgomery should fit that. He's obviously been a good locker room presence in his time in Detroit, but it just like kind of feels like, are you going to get that much production from David Montgomery than you would get from some of these free agent guys like Tyler Algier or whatever, who you probably could have got for cheaper, because I'm sure Montgomery will be looking for an extension now, and also without trading picks away. So it was a bit perplexing for me. Like I see it more as a culture move, so like I don't love it. And as you say, if the offensive line doesn't work, and Cleveland and Houston were for me the two teams coming into the off season that were right up there in terms of needing offensive line help to, you know, like if Cleveland were getting offensive line help, I didn't expect it to come from the Houston Texans. That's basically what I'll say. And sorry, I probably should just say in terms of DJ Moore pick, I think DJ Moore trade, that I think that's a really good trade for both sides. Like I think Buffalo, we kind of saw that they lack someone who can win, especially against man coverage. Nick Khalil Shakir and Kincaid are good players, but you need someone who can kind of blow the top off. And DJ Moore, I think we kind of know now he's never going to be that wide receiver one who you can do like your entire franchise around. But if he's a complementary piece, which he's going to be in a Josh Allen offense, I think he'd be a really effective player there, kind of take up what, like if Brandon Cooks would be productive late on in his career in Buffalo, I could see DJ Moore being able to be productive there. And then for Chicago, they have Rome Odunze, they have Luther Burton, they have Colson Loveland, they have their kind of young core they're going to build around Caleb Williams. So it made sense for them, especially because DJ Moore, in terms of culture, room fit seems to maybe, you know, take some plays off. And I think the last interception of the year in the playoffs was one play where people accuse them of that. So I think they're going to go, we're young, we're hungry, that's our identity. So it makes sense to move from DJ Moore if he's not going to be fully 100% in that, and he gets to go play with Josh Allen. So I'm sure he's very happy as well. Bit colder, but you know, he was with Chicago, so it won't be that much worse.
Yeah. We had a couple of players had the tags placed on them. So the franchise tag is if a team doesn't want to lose a player, they can give them the franchise tag. It's essentially a 1 year contract that's either the average of the top 5 salaries at that player's position over the last 5 years, or it's a 120% of what their salary was last year, whichever is greater. Um, it's kind of a holding on to a player, but you'll mostly find that these things are kicking off points for negotiations. So it just means that these guys don't test free agency. This is in place for them, and you can negotiate up until I think it's like the second week of the season or something to tack extra years onto it. So normally we'd expect a lot of these guys would just get signed to longer term deals off it. But we've got Dallas franchise tagging George Pickens, Atlanta franchise tagging Kyle Pitts, and the Jets franchise tagging Breece Hall. And then after that, we'll talk briefly about a very interesting one, the transition tag that Indianapolis have applied to Daniel Jones. But yeah, so look, we kind of knew that these ones were incoming. Like the Jets made it clear during their fire sale last year that they wanted to hold on to Breece Hall, and they're going to look to get like a 2 or 3 year deal done with him. Kyle Pitts came on very strong at the end of last year. Atlanta may like I think depending on how much he thinks his market would be worth, I think they'd like to sign him to a 3 year deal. But again, if he thinks that he should be getting absolute top end money for the last 8 games of last year, they might just say, look, we'll take this as a 1 year rental, and then we'll see what we can do afterwards. And George Pickens, he played excellently last year. Dallas will need to get a longer term deal done with him. The problem is just making the money work because they'll probably need to rejig a couple of other contracts to free up the space for it. But all of these make sense to me, and I would imagine all of these will have deals done by the start of the regular season.
Yeah, I think George Pickens for sure. Everything's lining up for Dallas wanting to re-sign him, and we know that Jerry Jones tends to be a guy that if he wants someone, he will pony up for them. And I think they've already done like restructures for Dak and a bunch of other stars in their team to basically free up money for a free agency splurge. But I assume also to get the George Pickens contract done this offseason. Now, George Pickens, if he's anything like he is on the sideline or on the field, I don't know how good a negotiator he is. So hopefully his agent can kind of just go, okay, well, they offered you a big number, just take it, basically type situation. So I expect that to get done. Atlanta, as you say, I think obviously given that they don't have a first round pick, I don't think they're probably in an off-season mood to lose talent, even with a transition in their coaching and stuff like that. So I think like they see Kyle Pitts, there's enough there, and I think like that might be one where if someone brings up a decent trade offer, they might take it in the offseason in a worst case scenario. So I think Kyle Pitts, he obviously had kind of a comeback year last year after having a very disappointing middle part of his rookie contract. And I think might have maybe discovered what he's good at and what he's not good at, just kind of work from there. And then Breece Hall, obviously he was one of the many malcontented Jets players, so a little bit surprising to see him tagged. But obviously the Jets, like, they basically have all the cap in the world and they're not really have anyone to pay, so why would you get rid of your good players that you have, either to pay them yourself and hopefully have them part of the rebuild process that will undergo hopefully in the upcoming seasons, or as trade pieces in the off season if you want to get some compensation back. So there's no point in letting them go for nothing. So yeah, Breece Hall, I think it's a fairly rich running back market, so he would have been the top of it and got paid decently. But I think the Jets will be happy enough just to kind of work with him as the RB1 if they have to next season. And then the transition tag, the first time for a quarterback since the 90s or something like that, apparently.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen a transition tag. So essentially, a transition tag is a similar setup. A player's going to hit free agency. The team don't want to lose them, but they don't want to necessarily pay them the average of the top 5 players of the position or whatever. So if a player is on a transition tag, they can sign an offer sheet with another team. So Daniel Jones can go out and talk to other teams and see what they're willing to pay him, and then the team that placed the tag are allowed to match that offer if they want to keep him. So I I don't think this was a great move, if I'm honest. I think you're putting yourself at a bit of risk here. If someone decides they do want to take a punt on Daniel Jones, you can get locked into it. I think depending on the length of contract being offered and so on, it can cause issues. I don't I don't think the difference in what you're getting here versus doing a franchise tag, or just coming to an agreement with him in advance of hitting free agency is going to be, because like what do you think Daniel Jones's number is, like 25 million a year, something like that, 30 maybe?
Yeah, like he would have been a mid-tier, so that these days he probably would have been like over 30 million per year, probably, like similar to Sam Darnold's contract.
Given the injury thing, I think he'd probably have taken like
so that's why I think he would have got like
80 million or something.
Like, I think that's why he would have. I think he probably would have been looking at least 30 million, like kind of Sam Darnold kind of level. Just because he has them over a barrel. Like, they don't, like, obviously there's reports that they are considering they're open to offers for Anthony Richardson, who
he wants to be paid as much as Super Bowl champion Sam Darnold.
Well, he wasn't paid. He wasn't Super Bowl champion when he was paid last offseason, right? So, and look, like Daniel Jones, it's a tough one because I get that they're desperate and that's a regime that basically is win now mode. But, you know, even if Daniel Jones does come back from his injury in time for the season, we've seen with previous examples like Kirk Cousins with the Achilles injury that even if they're able to play, they're not quite as dynamic. And Daniel Jones, a lot of his value came from being as an athlete as much as being a solid quarterback. So I don't like this at all. Personally speaking,
No,
I think
it's a bad shout.
I think that I'm not like I know there's certain teams like say the Vikings, whatever like that might have picked up the tab. But I don't think it would be that much more than what you're going to pay. Like I don't know if the transition tag, whatever the matching offer would have been if someone actually does that. I don't think they will, but if they did that, would be that much different from how much they would have had to offer in free agency to get him back anyway. So I think it's a little bit. I think it's bad, and obviously one of the implications is that you can only use the tag franchise or transition. You can only have one tag per offseason, and they had what is in a very weak wide receiver room, wide receiver free agent class, Alec Pierce, the top free agent, which we'll talk about in a moment, who they now can't tag and who they will either have to match in the free agency frenzy or lose. So I don't like this at all for Indianapolis, but I think it's just it's a sign of a desperation for a regime that basically possibly should have been got rid of last year, if for no other reason that, you know, if you put a GM and a head coach in a scenario where they have to win, and now you're putting them in a scenario where they're doing that with a quarterback who's coming off a major injury, who may or may not be back to full health.
2 first rounders, drafting trading for a cornerback, like it's just it's not.
It's just very it's very rare for that type of scenario to just turn around. Like, you know, they're very much huffing on the first half of the season. It's coming back. It's still good. Well, like that second half of the season, just ignore it. We'll just do the first half of the season and then do that for an entire season. We'll just with an injured quarterback. It'll be fine.
We'll start the season with Philip Rivers this time. That'll work, you know. And there's been a couple of notable cuts, but we'll be talking about a lot of those in the preview. So we had like Miami have cut Tyreek Hill, the wide receiver, Tua, Kyler, Kirk Cousins, all these guys are all gone.
There's been a fair amount of cuts, but I would say most of the ones that are of note we'll be talking about as free agent prospects now.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill is he's a big name, but he's coming off a major injury, so I don't know if he'll ever, like he could be, he's someone who'll get picked up eventually, but it might be once he's confirmed.
I'd say it'll be week 6, week 7, something like that. Someone will pick him up and go, here's an incentive laden contract for if you get on the field kind of job.
Yeah, so I don't think he's going to be a live prospect in the kind of free agency frenzy we're going to be talking about in the kind of upcoming week or so.
Yeah, so on that lovely note, let's go and have a look at the free agent preview. So overall summary for this one, Ronan, offensive side, there's a couple of interesting names here at like wide receiver, maybe on the offensive line, but outside of the top 1 or 2 guys, not as like great for depth if you're looking to fill out a roster, but not as great if you're looking for difference making starters. A lot of guys at the inside offensive line, a lot of running backs in there, and boy, there's a lot of names at quarterback that are interesting. Not necessarily good, interesting is how I'd phrase it. And then the defensive side is there's good guys at a lot of spots, maybe not the superstars. There's a lot of talk about guys being available for trade though, so there's windows open for stuff, but in terms of free agents, a lot of guys, if you just need a slight upgrade or you need an extra rotational guy, you'll be great. If you're looking for a difference making starter, not a lot of guys hitting free agency.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think offense, wide receiver, you're going to be competing for some thin pickings, maybe the trade market. If you're willing to expend the first round pick, there's better options there. And offensive tackle, as always, there's not many elite options. There's some guys who are solid, but if you want Jawan Taylor, he's now free, so that's the kind of level you're probably looking at. But if you want a running back, if you want an interior offensive lineman, there's loads of options. And I say a quarterback, it's an intriguing mix, and as we'll talk about the contract situation, makes some of these a one-time bargain type situation potentially. And as I said, defense, there's not really any kind of standout defensive players. There's guys who a year ago, like Trey Hendrickson, might have been in that tier, but I don't think they're all kind of either veterans, 1-2 type year guys you're looking at who might give you still some of the high level stuff, or young players who've been good but not elite, who you're hoping maybe take that next step up with you and make your team that much better. But it's not the most exciting free agency, but I think the injection of some quarterbacks has probably added a bit more spice than was there a week ago.
Yeah, and that's where we'll start. We'll kick off with the quarterbacks. Obviously, a lot of teams in the market for this. Pittsburgh, the Jets, Arizona, Miami, Minnesota. Vegas are obviously looking, but almost certainly going to be picking up Mendoza at the top of the draft. So who are we looking at here? I think the biggest name from a what you would expect is more of a traditional reason for interest is Malik Willis. He played well last season when he stepped in for Green Bay, provides good running as well as decent accuracy, very much kind of making it look like it was the Titans' fault that he was shitty for the first couple of years of his career. He's going to command a lot of interest. There's going to be a lot of people looking to try and get him, so that's going to push up his price a lot because this is a thin group beyond that. Outside of the fact that there are other factors that make the other people interesting. So Kyler Murray has been cut by the Cardinals. You might not think he's the best player in the world. I don't think he's the best player in the world. But because he's been cut by the Cardinals and due to the language in these contracts, he will be playing for the vet minimum. So, or can play for the vet minimum. So he can play for like $1.5 million because the Cardinals are going to be paying him $36 million anyway.
So every NFL contract, well, nearly every NFL contract of any note will have offset language, which basically means that any money that you pay Kyler Murray this year would basically be coming off the guarantees that he already had from Arizona, and therefore from his point of view, there's no incentive for him to get paid this year because that would just be it'd be net zero for him in terms of actual money in his pocket.
Unless he
So
can find someone who wants to pay him more than $36.5 million, which he
yeah, so
cannot
that's unlikely.
find. Yeah, he may as well play for. And for Kyler, it's going to be uh, more rehab on his image, make it like kind of.
Yeah.
The Cardinals like to say that it's his fault, that he's the mistake, that he's the problem. He plays too much Call of Duty and so on. But yeah, so he wants to go. He probably wants to go somewhere where he thinks he has a route to at minimum play a couple of games, maybe even get a year as a starter, just sign a 1 year deal for the vet minimum, and then hit the market with a refreshed. People are interested in the move. Very similar for Tua. He's owed a lot of money, so he can play for the vet minimum as well. Kirk Cousins has been cut. I don't think he has money left, so I think you have to pay Kirk Cousins. He's still getting some money from the guys, but like it's a slightly different situation. Aaron Rodgers is out there in the wilderness taking ayahuasca, trying to decide whether he's going to come back to the Steelers or not. Like those are your main guys in here. Do you have anyone like I like Malik Willis? I thought he was good. I would be very disappointed if my team was going out and going, do you know what? There's our $120 million man.
But I think, reclamation projects have been in vogue in recent times. Obviously, Sam Darnold was a reclamation project and he just won a Super Bowl. Geno Smith, who may be available as a kind of cheap trade candidate this offseason,
No one wants Geno Smith.
once the Raiders buy something. He rebuilt his career, certainly, and showed to be a viable starter if in the right situation. Not someone who can fix something by himself, certainly not. But, we've seen these guys come back and do that. You don't have to be drafted in the top three and then you instantly turn into Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen and stuff like that. Like we're seeing, because of the nature of the NFL and the slowdown in the offensive schemes and stuff like that, that game managers are more valuable right now. And we see with Malik Willis, for example, like he was someone who was drafted by Tennessee, was a bit of a disaster, lost his position to Will Levis as basically the backup, but was known to be highly talented, highly toolsy, I suppose is the best term, when he was drafted. And, there was rumours of going first round because he had so much talent, but eventually he dropped to the third because he was so raw. But you see that under a good head coach in LaFleur in Green Bay and in a good scheme, he could be a highly productive player. Now, is he someone who is going to be, able to play like a West Coast offense for you? Probably not. But he's an exceptional runner off the ball. He's someone who, in his limited snaps as like a proper quote-unquote quarterback, has definitely shown the capacity to do well on the medium and long shots in terms of accuracy and in terms of the arm talent is certainly there. And so if you set your expectations to the appropriate level, and if he's looking for compensation in that kind of what we now consider to be like the middle class of quarterback contracts, which is kind of in that kind of 30 to 45 million type area, then it could turn out to be all right. And obviously, because he's not like an elite guy or has a much elite tape, then it's probably not going to be a situation where you have a whole bunch of guarantees. Like you might have a high headline number, but the guarantees are such a way that if he flames out, you can get rid of him without causing the franchise to go down to it. So I think Malik Willis he's probably the most intriguing player. He's the youngest player here. He's got the most upside, and unlike say Kyler Murray, he seems to actually like playing football. So that definitely gives him a leg up in terms of that, and just a bit more upside there in terms of potential. And obviously, like you saw with Green Bay when he was playing, like you could argue that the offense was potentially even better under him than Jordan Love. So
Yeah.
the upside there is going to tantalize someone.
Oh
For
God,
sure.
yeah. And like he seems like someone who'll take coaching well. I think it'll be a fine setup, but yeah, it's just more. I think with the number of teams who are going to be out there bidding for his services, he's going to become way more expensive than you
Yeah.
would expect to be paying for
But
Malik Willis.
quarterback in terms of its economic value is considered to be traditionally like the least, like still undervalued due to the nature of the cap basically. So even
Yeah,
if you're overpaying him, you're not really overpaying him if he turns out to be even just like the 16th best quarterback in the
yeah.
league.
But
Um,
the issue with paying him isn't that you're paying him that money. It's that that's money you're not spending on the rest of your team.
yeah,
So the cap is
but
still a constraint, even though they are
yeah,
in the general sports landscape underpaid. But yeah.
but a lot of these teams, like say for example the Jets, don't really have to worry about the cap because
No, they don't.
they
No one
have no
wants
one
to
else to
play for
pay.
them. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and then outside of that, like you have these kind of two players. I think teams are certainly probably more excited to sign a Kyler Murray than Tua, just because Kyler actually still has upside. Like I think he's kind of like he definitely seems like he started protecting himself last season and potentially even the season before in Arizona, especially after his big injury. So you wonder whether he still has that like athletic upside. And then if he doesn't have the athletic upside, then you obviously go back to all the concerns about him as a someone who doesn't invest as much in the reading the game, doing his research, spending too much time playing Call of Duty, all that kind of stuff. And, literally having that contract clause, which obviously will get brought up. So, and I kind of feel Kyler, it's an interesting decision for him. Like, is he going to go to a team where they're going to ask him to be the savior on like a 1 year deal, like say the Jets, or is he more willing to go to a team that's in a better setup, potentially even as a backup, and kind of learn from that, learn from a good franchise and just actually put in the time and effort required? Because I think like, some of what happened with Kyler is probably intrinsic. Like he probably isn't the guy who like self-motivates as well as like the psychopaths of the Mahomes and the Tom Brady's of the world. But if you put these guys with good coaches, we know that good coaches like the Sean McVays of the world will get the best out of these guys and put them on the right path again to hopefully get to their potential. And we know Kyler Murray, outside of being undersized, has good arm talent, has good athleticism, and should be someone who in theory should be. It's the reasoning for the number one overall pick those years ago. And he's just been with a lot of interesting OC options. So we've never really seen him with like an elite play caller, it feels like. Sorry, Cliff Kingsbury. And we'll kind of interested to see that. Tua is a game manager, right? And if you want to run like if you just want a game manager, I think Tua can do that. And if he's just not like, and obviously because he's cheap, you can put him on a team which will hopefully have a more complete roster than the later stage Miami Dolphins. But we've seen that he can be a solid player. But obviously he's highly limited in terms of his upside. He doesn't have a great deep ball. And he's obviously got his injury concerns. But if you're talking like a veteran minimum contract, like I think there's teams that will certainly pick him up and maybe get a good year out of it and kind of resetting their own expectations of an organization. But I wouldn't be excited to be the team that picks him up. He does well, and then suddenly the team's like, oh, we should extend him. It's like, please don't. And then Aaron Rodgers is going on he's gone very mysterious again in terms of what he may or may not do. Nobody cares, Aaron. And Kirk Cousins is probably better off as a backup, but maybe there's a team when all the musical chairs is over that's desperate enough that they consider him or Jimmy Garoppolo or Russell Wilson again to kind of be their starter. But I certainly would be top of the queue for that. And I think if you're moving beyond that, like Geno Smith, like the Raiders, the Raiders have said that they're not immediately going to cut him, basically. So I assume they're going to hang on to him a little bit longer, see if someone's willing to offer some trade cap or sufficient trade capital to make it worth it. But they might go, well, like we're going to be drafting the number one overall pick, a quarterback almost certainly, Mendoza. Gino seems like a good guy. He obviously has a lot of life lessons to impart potentially, hopefully, having matured as a quarterback and had a lot of like stuff to gone through. So they might go, yeah, for the amount of money that they save, which is minimal on the cap, they might just go, like we might as well keep him because they certainly don't have any issues with the cap. But I think, if there's a team after all of this shakes out who's in a very bad situation at quarterback, they might go, why not Gino? And then obviously the other intriguing names are probably Anthony Richardson, who's very much
reclamation project there.
Yeah,
From what I understand, though, the injury that he's got is way worse than people seem to think. He still has like sections where he just doesn't have visibility out of that eye. I wouldn't be touching that with a barge pole. I think the most likely one beyond that is Derek Carr's talked about coming out of retirement. You'd have to so my understanding is the Orleans still own his rights, do they?
Yeah, so he retired as a New Orleans Saint, so his rights still retain with the Saints. So,
I
but
thought
because of
I
the
thought
way,
that I thought he returned money to them so that they didn't retain his rights anymore. But I must
no,
have
I
misunderstood that.
think he returned money so that if he unretired, that it wouldn't screw up their cap basically. So he would be eminently tradable, more tradable basically, rather than they were screwing him over basically. So basically,
Interesting.
like the cap, like the Saints were in cap hell, so he helped them out the cap hell situation basically.
Yeah,
Um, and like, look, Mac Jones is being associated with trade options, and people have gone based on how he played for San Francisco. Maybe he deserves another shot as a starter, but all the indications is he's on a very affordable deal with San Francisco for this year.
yeah, and
And
they've
unless they get
seen
a,
how much they need a backup as
yeah,
well because I don't think they've had a full season.
so you're probably talking at least a day to pick to probably even get San Francisco to even consider getting rid of Mac Jones. And hey, if you want to throw out Joe Flacco or Justin Fields, it technically hasn't been cut yet, but probably will be cut. Then you can try that, I suppose.
Yeah. Let's move on to the skill position players. We'll kind of go wide receiver first, then running back just to chop it up a little bit. So, we've got lots of teams would like updates. These ones: Washington, Tennessee, San Francisco, New England, Denver. So your top of the line is Alec Pierce. Came on very well last season. Doesn't have like the biggest headline numbers, but is a big yak guy. Can provide the deep threat. Rashid Shaheed, Mike Evans, Wandale Robinson, Romeo Dubs, John Jennings. These are the kind of guys who are knocking around there. Or if you wanted to look at kind of the trade market, Brian Thomas Jr., Jacksonville wide receiver, might be available, although they've been hemming and hawing about that. AJ Brown, I think there's a more than 50% chance he's gone from Philadelphia. So like there are options there. Alec Pierce is obviously the pick of the litter here. Mike Evans, uh, coming back off that injury, I think he's still got enough in the tank to go for it. And Shaheed, obviously, coming off the Super Bowl, adds a lot in the return game. So, anyone jumping out at you here that you'd really want to go after if you were in that hunt?
I don't think you'd be 100% excited to be looking at this wide receiver class. I think it's a fairly weak one, and so the trade candidates might be able to get the fairly substantial asks that they have for acquiring them, which I'll talk about in a second. But Alec Pierce is probably the most intriguing name, given that he's someone who's entering the prime of his career and who has some pretty gaudy statistics. I think he averages like over 20 yards per reception. So you're
Hmm.
very much getting like someone who's like in that the Sean Jackson, Brandon Cooks type wide receiver. Probably not someone who's like the modern franchise wide receiver one, but certainly someone who's in that kind of wide receiver 1A or wide receiver 2 type range. And obviously, given that he's done that with a very variable selection of quarterbacks in terms of their quality, then you could obviously go, if we put him in a good team, then this is someone who can have like 1,000+ season and has those explosive plays, which are, obviously the league has done a lot to try and cut them down, which are still extremely valuable. So I don't see Alec Pierce as a wide receiver one, but I think he will probably get paid like a wide receiver one, given the paucity of additional options that are available out there. And Rashid Shaheed is very much in a similar bucket. Like, he obviously, as he said, has some extra value because of his ability as a returner on special teams. But he was kind of a meme for the Saints. Like, when you be tracking fantasy and stuff, it's like, oh, Rashid Shaheed went for his like one of two receptions and one of them went for like a 70-yard touchdown. And he showed maybe a little bit more in his last year before he was traded to the Seahawks. He was okay with the Seahawks, but he was probably better early on in the year. It's the kind of wide receiver two beside Chris Olave for the Saints. But I don't think he's ever going to turn into like a dominant, like every route type wide receiver. Like, he's very good at the things that he's good at. And those are things you probably want to lean into. And then, yeah, Mike Evans, obviously getting toward the end of his career. Don't be surprised if he goes back to Tampa Bay on a reasonable contract. But I think he will probably see if someone's willing to make him a good offer, or if an offer comes from like a big contention team who could potentially get him another ring. But Mike Evans, classic, like he's your classic franchise wide receiver, your ex receiver, who can win one-on-one battles, who can moss people and all that kind of stuff. And obviously his 1,000-yard streak season is over, so he can get a reset there. But if you go beyond that, it's like Wandale Robinson, Romeo Dobbs, Juwan Jennings. All of these are good, solid players, but they very much fit more like a decent wide receiver two or a high-end wide receiver type mold. Like Wandale Robinson was a PPR machine, very small, undersized, but very efficient, kind of fits in the kind of Khalil Shakir, maybe slot type role. Romeo Dobbs, very effective at catching the ball. and kind of in the red zone and stuff like that, but not someone who has the upside in terms of physical traits to be, anything more. Like, he's never going to be that dominant with Jamar Chase type wide receiver, and Juwan Jennings is kind of similar, kind of a good receiver, but yeah, like kind of doesn't fit into that kind of elite level. So as I say, if you're looking for a game changer at wide receiver, like Steph Diggs, apparently it was released by New England, so you can see if you get another year out of him. Though given his legal issues, I'm not sure that's a great idea. But then basically your kind of two big options is, one is Brian Thomas Jr., kind of a little bit surplus to requirements with basically had a wide receiver room shook out last year, where he kind of became the kind of third fiddle behind Parker Washington, and they acquired the guy from Vegas who did very well as well. So if and he's obviously a first round pick coming into his third year. So if they get a first round offer plus something else, I think they will certainly consider it. But I don't think they feel like they're pressured to Jacksonville, even if they're a little bit tight in the cap. He's not that expensive as someone on his rookie contract. And then the alternative is AJ Brown, someone who's a bit further into their career, so maybe you're not going to get the best out of him, but if you need a win now type impact, then he's obviously someone who has shown that he can be the alpha dog for an offense, which he has been for Philadelphia. And I think Philadelphia, they're very much holding out for themselves for a first round pick. If someone offers a first round pick, I think they would take it at this point, and they can move on to have Devonta Smith as their wide receiver one, kind of move into the JSN type trajectory. But I don't think Philly are like, we have to trade him, despite how much he, his discontent has hardly been hidden over the last couple of seasons with the nature of his relationship with Jalen Hurts and that offense. So, yeah, I think both of them are good options at the higher end. I think DJ Moore would have been in that class as well, but obviously he's now been traded to Buffalo. So, yeah, there are options here. But outside of Mike Evans potentially having like an Indian summer, I don't see any of these guys in free agency as being alpha dog wide receivers who could lead your room. So you may need to trade if you want someone like that.
Yeah. The running back market is a bit more buoyant. You've got Kenneth Walker, obviously coming off a Super Bowl MVP, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad White, Tyler Algiers, and then probably be able to pick up the likes like James Conner or someone like that in the trade market. It's a solid group. I think obviously Kenneth Walker is going to pace the top of this group. Maybe if Breece Hall had made it up there, there'd be some contention for that. But like Kenneth Walker's going to top that out. Like I'd imagine Travis Etienne, I've heard linked to the Chiefs at the moment. It's an interesting one. It's one of those moments where I kind of get annoyed about the structure where free agency happens before the draft, because you'd love to know, like, do you have a shot at the likes of Jeremiah Love before you have to go and decide if you want to take one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in free agency. But if you're looking for a running back, this is a pretty good crop to be looking at, right?
Yeah, it's got good depth and it has some interesting bits at the top. Like, obviously, you don't expect like a Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs to get the free agency, but like, I think, finding someone like Kenneth Walker or Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker, to give him his proper title, as an option is obviously pretty good. Like, Kenneth Walker, really explosive, has a very patient game, not kind of boom and bust in terms of his running style, but as you saw in the Super Bowl run, that the Seahawks have someone who is very capable of being an explosive playmaker for your offense, if that's something that you're looking at, and someone who would work well within like his own scheme, especially going forward. I think there are some concerns. Like, he has been injury prone over his career, so you might have seen the best last, which is good for his market value and probably why he won't be back with the Seahawks. But you're taking a little bit of risk there, so like many running backs, probably better if he's part of a tandem than just being like your top dog on, unconditionally. And then Travis Etienne, similar. Like, I think he's an interesting career, with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's been a bit up and down, but he's kind of saved his best for last, it feels like. And I think especially in his last year there, he showed an ability to be effective between the tackles, which is something he might have been considered to be a little bit quote unquote soft as a running back prior to that. So I think he's definitely someone who should have a very healthy market, and I think now shows he can fit as being like an RB1 and doesn't be an RB1A ideally, but could be an RB1 just standalone if required. And then when you get beyond that, there is like stat. You have guys like Kenneth Gainwell, who was probably the most effective offensive player, I'd say, for the Pittsburgh last year, and a very much a do-it-all type running back, not elite at anything, but good at everything to a certain extent. You have guys who've been effective enough as starters, like Rashad White. You have guys like Tyler Algier, who've been very effective as backups, but who have shown enough that they could definitely, if given the opportunity, turn into a very effective starter for you. So, and there's several other names beyond that. So this is a healthy market and one that you should be able to get someone. But I think for running back, you're never looking for like a dominant guy per se most of the time. But all of these guys could easily turn into like a running back one as part of a tandem very easily, you could see.
Yeah, yeah. Offensive line. A lot of people
Well,
want
don't
offensive.
don't don't forget the tight ends, Connor. There is
Okay. We'll
Isaiah
talk some.
Likely and Kate Otten and Dallas Goddard and Charlie Kohler and technically Travis Kelsey, but like he's either retiring or go back to the Chiefs. But like, yeah,
Yeah,
like there's no elite players here. But if you want a receiver tight end, Isaiah Likely will probably get paid a decent amount. If you want an all round tight end, Kate Otten is probably a solid option. Dallas Goddard, David Njoku are guys who've had flashes before. And if you want a blocking tight end, Charlie Kohler are your options there. No one really elite, like, change your franchise type tight end. That's rare enough, to be frank. But decent, solid options and some veteran names like Evan Ingram and TJ Hawkinson who probably are available or could be cut. Either cut or available for very cheap as a trade this offseason as well. So, yeah, you're not no game changers, but certainly options there if you're looking for a new tight end.
yeah.
Now onto the much more exciting offensive linemen.
Everyone wants linemen. Linemen are exciting. Yeah. Look, everyone wants linemen. Top guy this year, Tyler Linderbaum, center. I believe he's out at the moment meeting with the Bears because they had their surprise retirement there. If you're looking interior, Elijah Vera Tucker, Daniel Edwards, yeah, like uh, Zion Johnson, Samelo, Wyatt Teller. If you want centers, Connor McGovern, Cade Mays. Tackles, there's not quite as much available. Uh, Luminor is out there. Jawan Taylor is available. He's a good tackle, but he just has a lot of penalties is the problem. Braxton Jones, Braden Smith. So th- there's a cliff face standoff happening in San Francisco between Trent Williams and them. So there's an outside chance that he gets there. Walker Little is probably available in trade from Jacksonville. Um, Elton Jenkins, Ben Power, Cesar Ruiz, these guys might be available as well, slash might get cut. So like there's guys here. There's definitely starting caliber, particularly inside of the line, Ronan. There's definitely guys for there. The problem is always just mediocre offensive linemen will get paid like top 10% offensive linemen if they get to free agency because there's just such a demand for them.
And I think that makes sense to a certain extent. Like, offensive line is one of those situations where many theorize that, your offensive line is only good as its worst player. So paying for a middling player who makes sure that the floor of your offensive line isn't like too low makes a lot of sense. And we've seen obviously teams like Cleveland, Houston, Chargers, Giants, Vegas, even teams like Philly have issues when the offensive line starts breaking apart and suddenly they either fall apart completely or become a lot less efficient, like Philly were last year. And so I think, interior guys are probably still slightly undervalued, but I think Tyler Linderbaum is now setting out like he's a top 5, maybe top 10 center, and it's a really important position. Probably a little bit undersized. I don't think he's considered to be one of those guys who's like a second quarterback type center who's kind of reading the entire field for you. So some people have talked about being a little bit overrated, but to have someone who's like a Pro Bowl caliber center is really important. And basically everything suggesting that he'll get paid like a top level guard instead of a center, where centers traditionally be like 5 million or so less than the guard position, and that's another 5 million less than the tackle position or so, just as a kind of rule of thumb, or whatever percentage is it. So I think Linderbaum will get paid a lot of money and will probably be all right value because, as I said, the cap doesn't exist for a lot of teams because they have more than enough money to play with. And I'd say a team like Chicago makes a lot of sense because they have suddenly a need for them, and they're obviously in a win now type mode. So Linderbaum will get a big contract, and I think he'll be able to pick his team in terms of going somewhere maybe he'll have more likely to succeed, which has some solid talent around him. And then there are lots of good interior offensive lineman options. Elijah Vera Tucker has been a Pro Bowl, maybe even all pro type player for the Jets. Had some injury issues, but that's got very high upside there. David Edwards has been a great player for Buffalo, and I think for New England previously. Guys like Zion Johnson have been good for the Chargers. Isaac Sumalu has been good for multiple teams. You have Wyatt Teller, but even beyond that, there's a whole bunch of depth at the guard position in particular, in terms of guys like you've been solid veterans like Kevin Zeitler, Wyatt Teller, Mekhi Becton, if you want to do reclamation, Joe Petonio. So if you need a guard, this is a great offseason to do that in terms of depth, and so hopefully you don't have to overpay for it. But if you need a offensive tackle, especially a franchise level offensive tackle, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Like Rasheed Walker is really more of a general offensive lineman. He has played tackle for Green Bay, but really has played across the entire line. So you're not 100% sure he makes sense as like a franchise guy. Jermaine Illuminar, good pass protector, not as much a factor in the run game, which is obviously more of an issue now because obviously of the change in offensive emphasis. Jawan Taylor, enough said about his nature as a
To be honest, like
his first step.
But this is the thing. I would take Joanne Taylor in a lot of spots because he is good at what he does. He causes a lot of penalties, and the problem was he was being paid too much money for a guy who gives up that many
Yeah,
penalties. So I think if you could get Joanne Taylor at like 10 million a year less than he was going to be being paid by the Chiefs, I would take him in a heartbeat. But it's just just he was
he
being
might
paid too much
he
for the
might
mistakes.
genuinely be turning into an underrated player because his flaws are so evident to even the most uneducated NFL fan. Braden Smith's coming off a major injury, but if he can come back from that successfully, he's been a good right tackle for Indianapolis for multiple years. Braxton Jones being kind of below average, but he's probably someone to get paid regardless. And that's why, for example, someone like Walker Little, who might be from Jacksonville, makes sense. But especially if Trent Williams does come free, and apparently big disagreement between San Francisco and himself and what he should be getting in the final year of his contract, he will get a huge market because he's obviously someone who's been a rock solid franchise left tackle for over a decade now, and teams will be salivating at the chance of getting a 1 or 2 year rent. Like, even the Rams will kind of clear things out to have maybe the potential of getting a guy like that
Yeah.
in the room. And then there's some options at centre as well, like Conor McGovern and Cade Mays. But a tackle, you're going to be in trouble. But if Trent Williams comes free, it'll be a feeding frenzy to get his contract, get his name on a contract.
No, of course, of course. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. Look at defensive line first, the first level. New Orleans, Baltimore, Detroit, Tampa Bay, Buffalo, Indy. So Kansas City in this mix as well. Although they're probably looking more youth than free agency. Top names on this one are probably edge rushers Jalen Phillips and Trey Hendrickson. You've also got a Dafe Owe in here, Boye Mafe, Jonathan Franklin Myers. So there's a lot of kind of good named talent in here. And then even if you want to go a step beyond that, like, likes of like Shazon had a very good year last year. Quiddy Pay would be there. I was amazed to see, I kind of keep forgetting Calais Campbell is still in the league at this stage, TJ Reader and people like that. Khalil Mack in theory is around, but there's a lot of talk about him possibly retiring. And then if you wanted to look at trades, there's been several articles today alone about how Vegas have come around to the idea that actually maybe we should just trade Max Crosby. So I imagine that might happen. New York Giants have been very vocal about they are going to look for a trade partner for Kayvon Thibodeau. Jonathan Grenard is available from Minnesota. He's a good performer. It shows how cash strapped they are because, like, I think his contract's like 16 million. He's a decent performer in that. I think he's young enough. That pretty good deal there. And then like the likes of Rashawn Gary, Arik Armstead, and so on will probably be available on trade as well. So like it's not a bad time to be looking at this first level, at this defensive line level at all. A couple of good names there, a couple of guys that you might be able to find kind of diamonds in the rough as well.
Yeah, I think basically if you're looking at the quote unquote, everything's a reaction to what recently must happened. The Seahawks won with a, talented but deep pass rusher group. So did Philly in terms of the edge players. And so if you're looking to like stack up a bunch of players and you have a bunch of cap room, then certainly this isn't a bad class in which to do so. Like it's topped by Jalen Phillips, who's someone who's shown elite production in the past in Miami and played very well for Philly, even if the stat, like the kind of headline stats weren't as gaudy. But he's someone who obviously showed that he's back to being closer to the player that he was before his major injury in Miami. So if you have someone who has got 10 plus sacks in the years before and who's still in the middle of his career, then he should have a very healthy market. So I imagine he will be the top of the class here in terms of pay, in terms of interest. But then Trey Hendrickson, a testament to the stupidity of the Cincinnati front office. Like they could have had a fairly substantial draft pick last year if they traded him away last year, and they're just going to let him go. And then I'm sure they'll probably sign too many free agents and won't even get like a comp pick for him next offseason. But anyway, Trey Hendrickson finally free, obviously coming off a much less successful year than 2 years ago. Obviously someone who's much older, so may not have the same amount of tire, but obviously given his elite production only 2 years ago, I imagine he should have a healthy market for a team that's looking to hopefully get him back to his best. And once you get beyond that, you have more guys who've been productive, but probably not a consistent fashion, but who could certainly be an effective part of a rotation. So Odafe Owe was very effective with the Chargers after being traded away by Baltimore. Boye Mafe, he's been up and down with the Seahawks, but has generally been a solid player. Quiddy Pay's been a solid player. Chase on said how they come back here last year. Joseph Asai, Arnold Ebikadi. These are all solid guys, and there's a whole bunch of other kind of mid-level names who would be part of having that like 4 or 5 level rotation at the edge position to keep all these guys healthy and fit and hopefully be effective that way, rather than relying on the kind of Myles Garrett approach or the Max Crosby approach where that guy kind of is your pass rush. So I think at edge it's actually pretty good, and if you're in a pinch, you consider a Khalil Mack or a Joey Bosa or even Von Miller, I suppose, might still be around if you just want a 1-year rental type situation as well. I think where you might have more issues if you have a need at interior defensive lineman, like John Franklin Myers is the highest, and he's still probably only like a, Pro Bowlish type player at best. And then you have guys like Calais Campbell might come back again. Draymond Jones is like a good kind of element end, kind of someone who's a hybrid edge interior player. DJ Reader might have something left in the tank as a nose tackle. Sheldon Rankins is like a good player, but not elite in any sense. So if you need an elite interior player, there's not many options both in the free agency pool or really as trade options. Like I'd say Deron Payne might be your best option from Washington, but even he's been a bit off the boil since his big contract. So, I think edge should be healthy, but if you do want to make the big flashy move, then Max Crosby is the obvious candidate. And as you say, Vegas has been quite coy about that entire situation, but I think it's more likely he gets traded or not. But we kind of saw, they probably want what, Micah Parsons got. But he's older than Micah Parsons. He's probably not as complete a player as Micah Parsons. So I don't know if they're going to get that or not. And it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. And I said it's a more risky thing because obviously Micah Parsons obviously got injured, and then suddenly all of those draft picks were for nothing, basically for Green Bay down the stretch. And then Kayvon Thibodeau is an interesting name, given that they've basically replaced him via free agency and draft subsequently. But he should have a trade market, but probably like mid-round. Someone will probably get tantalized by his like athleticism. And then Jonathan Grenard is someone that Minnesota, they're basically in cut down mode. They've already cut a number of other veterans on their defensive line, and they basically said, we're open. If someone offers us like a day 2 pick, we'll certainly give you Jonathan Grenard, who's been a very good player, both for them and for the Texans previously. So as I said, fits that kind of rotation at this point, but probably be the top of your rotation type defensive lineman there. So yeah, I think for edge players, surprisingly pretty healthy here. If you need option, if you need interior players, you're going to be in a lot more trouble.
Yeah. Into the second level of the defense, linebackers and safeties. Kind of this section is headlined by linebacker Devin Lloyd, who's available. You've got Caden Ellis, Leo Chenal, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Bobby Okakuri. Like, those would be your kind of linebacker options. Safety size, Brian Cook, Kobe Bryant, Nick Cross, Cam Curl, Jaquan Brisker, Jalen Thomas. And then if you wanted to look into the trade market, Miami are probably open for business on Minkah Fitzpatrick, Jesse Bates, maybe Buda Baker, Tremaine Edwards, Pittsburgh. We still need to see a bit of clarity, but like Patrick Queen, maybe. Zaire Alexander in Indianapolis. This is basically, as you move back through the defense, you're going to kind of get lighter and lighter options available. Some of that's to do with the increased importance of some of these positions. They're not highly drafted, so they're affordable, so people tend to kind of keep them a little bit longer. But yeah, it's not the deepest group here if you're looking for a linebacker or a safety, is it?
Yeah, like I think it's a position where, it's probably increasing in value, so you'll hopefully see better players coming free from better people, more draft picks and stuff like that in the future years. But like Devin Lloyd headlines the class, and he's a very interesting player. He was a 3-down linebacker for Jaguars, had his best years the last 2 seasons. But I think the general sense is he's still someone who's better coming forward than coming backwards. So he's still someone who can be beat in terms of coverage and stuff like that. So you might have concerns of his being like a genuine like 3-down kind of field general type linebacker if you're going to pay him like that. So he kind of maybe seems a bit more like Patrick Queen in terms of like not being someone who's a complete linebacker but it's going to get paid like one. And when you move beyond that, you have like role player type guys like Caden Ellis and Leo Chenal and Key Walker and Okereke, who's cut by the Giants. They're all solid players, but like yourself, Leo Chenal, great player to have, but probably not someone you want to overpay, right? He's the kind of guy
it's
that the
exactly
elite
that kind
teams
of,
let
yeah.
go in free agency because they can't afford to keep all their guys. But he's a good guy to bring into a team trying to rebuild from the bottom and kind of get itself into being a competitive team. And it's similar in the safety position. Obviously, Brian Cook, also from the Chiefs, is someone who's played well for them. And if they had more cap space, I'm sure they'd like to keep, but not someone who's gonna, not someone who was elevating the defense to an elite level. And then similar, Kobe Bryant was solid for the Seahawks, but hardly someone who was like the key piece there in their defensive backfield. And like, yeah, Nick Cross, Cameron Curl, Jaquan Brisker, these are all like solid players. And then, yeah, I think if you're looking for a game changer, potentially, if you think they have gas in the tank, then Minkah Fitzpatrick and Jesse Bates are the kind of guys, or Budda Baker, maybe. I think Arizona aren't as keen on that, but maybe he's a Fravel with the new regime there in Arizona. Like, those are guys who are veterans, maybe a little longer in the tooth, but who have shown that that's what an elite all-pro type safety can do, and they can change the game for them. The guys who are available in free agency aren't really going to be there. And a linebacker, I don't think even in the trade market there's anyone who's over that level, but you get a solid guy like Queen or Edmonds potentially who might be a little step above the kind of lesser guys. I think the one guy you might get overpaid is probably Nakobe Dean. I think he's just got a lot of hype from the time that he was drafted from Georgia and being part of that elite defense. So I think he's someone who's got a healthy market, but being a bit undersized, still not a complete player. So he's probably the one guy that might have a bit more hype than the actual value of the contract would be justified by.
Very good. I'm not sure. Do we mention him there in the previous sections? I just got to pop up there to say Cam Jordan is going to hit free agency. He's
Like
New
Cam
Orleans
Jordan
for
is
15 years.
Yeah, like he is technically a free agent, but he will probably get just some kind of re-up contract with New Orleans like way later into the offseason. Like there is as I said, edge is one of those positions where I expect there'll be a long tail of players getting picked up beyond just the first week, because there are options out there.
I don't know, 10.5 sacks. Someone might just give him a rattle a bit earlier. Who knows? But yeah, then we're into the third level of defense, defensive backs and a bit more coverage, guys. It's not great out here. Jamel Dean, Jalen Watson, Alontae Taylor, Reek Woolen, Nashawn Wright, Cordell Flott, Josh Joby, Montaric Brown, Greg Newsome. Like it's fine if you're maybe looking for your third corner. Like I can see why we're seeing the Rams go into trade mode to try and fix this hole, because it's not necessarily coming from free agency here. You might see, I'd imagine L'Jarius Sneed will be cut from Tennessee, but I'm not sure if there's much left there. That's been 2 bad years. Jalen Ramsey is probably going to be gone from Pittsburgh Steelers, depending on where their plans are going. Yeah, it's not great if you're looking for secondary help.
I think if you're looking for guys who are like game changers, once again, you're not going to get that in the secondary this offseason, as I said, unless you're trading for Trent McDuffie, as we've already discussed previously. All these guys kind of fit into that, as you say, kind of like cornerback 2 at best, but probably cornerback 2/3 type players. Jamel Dean's a guy that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers literally themselves replaced in terms of their draft strategy last offseason. And while he had an up year, that's why he's probably the highest ranked cornerback coming into this free agency period. He's not a guy who's like an elite guy by any stretch, but he's certainly someone that you could put in there and certainly not have much of a concern about. And I think Jalen Watson, who's coming from Kansas City, and Alontae Taylor kind of fit into that mold as well. Like, you're not going to go, oh man, we got Jalen Watson or we got Alontae Taylor, amazing, but they're guys who should fit in, and you should have a fairly high degree of confidence that they won't shit the bed, basically. So I think you do need lots of players like that. Obviously, we still exist in a league where you need probably at least 3, 4, 5 defensive backs to feel comfortable, and that makes a lot of sense. The one that's probably the most intriguing is Tariq Woolen, because he's obviously from the Seahawks, and very, very up and down in terms of his play quality, but he's an athletic freak, right? He's someone who like jumps off the page in terms of athleticism, and so probably of these actually has the most upside, but also probably a much lower floor. And obviously we saw in the Seahawks the latter half of the season both of those things. You saw some really amazing plays, but you also saw plays where he took them off, or where he was like getting stupid flags and stuff like that. So I kind of had in my head, he feels like a Jet, because that just feels like a Jetsy thing to have, just like this kind of really up and down, splash plays, but also like costs you like a game or two type player. But and then Deshaun Wright is a guy who had a really productive year for Chicago this year, but otherwise has basically been anonymous. So you're kind of betting on the last year being the accurate assessment of him, and that was mostly based on him getting picks, not necessarily his coverage grades and stuff like that. And then Cordell Flat, apparently he's been a solid player for the Giants, but might get overpaid. Josh Jobe has been a good player for Seattle, but he feels like more likely to come back to Seattle because he should be at a more reasonable value of contract. Greg Newsome's a guy who has been good in the past, but generally has been on a downslide the last couple of years. And Kader Gahu's probably the top nickelback option if you're looking for someone who kind of plays in the slot. And as you say, there's guys who will get cut, like Jalen Ramsey potentially, or almost certainly Janarius Sneed. And I think there's even guys, if you're looking for a cheap trade, someone like Nate Hobbs from Green Bay or Kenny Moore from Indianapolis, like they both have cap issues. If you're looking for someone who's been a very good veteran nickelback in previous years, then both of them will be high level and should be available for a fairly cheap price due to the contract situation. So there are options there if you're looking for that specific position.
Yeah, very good. Well, I suppose that'll wrap up the free agency preview for now. We'll obviously be coming back to have a look at the draft and whatnot, and kind of see where some of these guys have landed and see what other. I'm imagining, just going through this, it re-emphasizes me. I think we're going to see a few more trades happening, because I think there's particularly the second and third level of the defenses. I imagine we're going to see some teams making some moves in those spaces. Any plans with yourself for the next couple of weeks then?
Nothing too exciting. I said you might be down in the
I'll be down
weekend
this
soon.
weekend. It'll be good.
And I think there's some things happening in Dublin as well, which could go up for. But nothing confirmed yet. But I know like the Six Nations is finishing up, so I'll probably keep an eye on that as we see if Ireland can win the Triple Crown and come second to France potentially in that.
Yeah, the F1 season starts back this Sunday, so I'm looking forward to that now.
The weird about the F1 is like obviously it starts with Australia, and you're like, am I really going to get up at like 6 a.m. to watch Australia?
Yeah, the answer is no, but I'm going to tape it and I'll probably watch it when I get home.
F1's very much one of those sports that I'm like, I'll get to you when you're like a third of the way into the season. Then I might start paying proper attention.
No, it's worthwhile thing to start this one because it's the new regs, so everything is all over the shop. There's one of the teams has said the car they have developed cannot get beyond 20 to 25 laps, so they plan to be retiring the car for the first couple of races so it doesn't blow up. It's
now my experience with new technology with F1 is that it's a very double-edged sword, because sometimes you get excitement because everything's up for grabs, but sometimes you get basically one team has finessed the new regulations and they suddenly have the best car by far in the entire field, and it turns into a complete slog.
Yeah, basically what it sounds like is that we've got two teams who have found those kind of edges, but in different areas. So it's a question of which one of them is going to. So my understanding going into this is the expectation is Mercedes have like absolutely impossible straight line speed. So basically they are going to be the fastest car by a distance on the straights, but they haven't got their cornering quite right, so they might lose a lot in the corners. Whereas I think Ferrari have got the cornering right, but maybe not the top end speed. And also Ferrari have got the launch right. Apparently there's a whole thing about how when the lights go out and they take off, that with the new structures there's a problem with the superchargers that drive the air into the engine, so a load of cars are just stalling out at the start line. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. I think it's definitely exciting.
We're fitting near the end of season 11 here, so maybe we're slowly morphing into some kind of combined NFL, F1, golf, rugby podcast.
Oh yeah, just general sports chat. Mildly informed sports banter. That's
NFL's too mainstream now. Like when we started this, NFL
no one was watching.
This,
now it's everywhere.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Next season we are turning to curling.
We just meet peak curling. This is a classic, buying pumpkins in November type thing, getting into curling right now, or figure skating. Like the peak has already gone past them, I'm afraid, Connor.
That's fair. We'll brush that idea away. Fair enough.
Or just save it for 3 years from now. Basically, that might be the sweet spot as you head into the next Winter Olympics.
2029, we'll get really into curling. Very good. Well, that'll wrap us up this week. So it's bye from myself. It's bye from Ronan.
Bye.
It's been all 4 quarters. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat to you in a couple of weeks.